our last speaker for the morning session. Janice Darlington is a senior application scientist with Collaborative Drug Discovery. Her knowledge of scientific database management platforms spans decades, working in drug discovery, from her early days helping to establish best practices in research data documentation at Merck, to starting out at small startups who utilized their database expertise and were successfully acquired for their IP by the likes of Bristol Myers Squibb. So she'll be talking to us about what modern data science management can do for data longevity.
Okay, I think my dementia might have switched these words around. What modern data and science management can do, or should be what modern science data management can do for data longevity. But data management in and of itself is a science, so. Okay, let's talk about extending the life cycle of your data for your scientific research. Took a quote from the Emperor of All Maladies, The Sweeping Victories of Post-War Medicine, illustrated the potent and transformative capacity of science and technology in American life. And I would like to think that, managing our data sciences or scientific data should mean the same thing. It opens up new doorways to, how we're going to collaborate and how we're going to make efficient use of our data. This is not meant to be a marketing talk. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit of science here. And I do want to thank the Buck Institute for giving us the opportunity to speak here. I want to tell you that the issue we face as scientists, I used to work at the lab bench. I've worked in neurodegenerative diseases. I have worked with fibrosis. I've worked with respiratory diseases. The issue we face with managing our scientific data is the ability to communicate with one another on this. It's the lack of collaboration. We do have finite resources, time, money, knowledge. We have to make efficient use of our time, of those resources. We're multimodal. So multimodal meaning that we come at the science from different perspectives. We're not all in one department. We come from different disciplines. We do need to keep this data secure. There are assets. We take pride in it. They mean money for us working as a company. It means something working with it academically. The issue also is poor practices. We have bad habits. Bad habits, challenges in the organization of that data. Hopefully, some of you have systems in place to keep track of these things, to keep it organized. I know we're ahead of lunch. I wanted to give you some food for thought here. If you don't, we want to keep it structured. We want to preserve that data integrity. We want to eliminate those data redundancies if they exist. We face very complex scientific challenges. We have, at the very top where we start with 10,000 ideas, many more ideas, and we all filter it down into one thing that we maybe bring to clinic, we bring to the market. And we have very complex solutions for all of this, and this mess of, communication, like who's keeping track of that data? Is it on someone's, computer, laptop, Excel sheet? Is one person in charge of it? Is that the master file? Is that not the master file? This is the only one or two slides that will really focus on CDD Vault. We're out there. This is our timeline. We've been around for 20 years. And in those 20 years, we started off in 2004 where it spun out of Lilly. I want to tell you that in 2020, that really, it was a year after I joined CDD in 2019, but a year after, CDD supported the COVID moonshot program as scientists worked around the world to collaborate and to communicate, to repurpose some of the therapeutics that had already been out there, so repurpose drugs. As they were communicating, collaborating, they were also bringing new ideas to fruition to solve this pandemic. Any system that you use should have something that securely tracks your assets, and they should track it uniquely. We're keeping track of those kids. I've got kids. And we pride ourselves on those things, and we don't want to forget about them, and we want to track them and keep, follow them as to where they go. And where they go into our assays, our experiments, and we want to keep track of that, and we do that through activity. We may keep an assay catalog of those things as well. We worry about bioinformatics, we worry about cheminformatics, but what about assay informatics and creating that assay catalog so we can help to reduce, redundancies and make our time more efficient as we're working through that research? Shouldn't we be able to visualize that data, the data that we put in? They're just a bunch of numbers, but we want to see what it means and make it meaningful. Of course, we've got our assets and we want to keep track of them, inventory. So we inventory what we have on hand as we put them into our experiments. We want to know if we have enough on hand. We'll talk about curves, AI, automation. That's all part of this particular package, but whether it's our package or someone else's package, just have a structured way of keeping track of your data. So we've got our assets, we want to keep track of them. You had a question in the last talk, and did you have data? Can you supply data for this particular thing, for this particular experiment, for this particular entity? And wouldn't it be great if you could just go to your database and fish out this compound for this assay and generate that report? It's all there. So that's what this is. As we work across these different modalities, these different sorts of therapeutics, it's not just the small molecule. I just showed you an example of the small molecule, but our therapeutics are siRNA, they're antisense oligonucleotides. I've got a plasmid map here. They're going to be protein, they're going to be antibodies, they're going to be a mixture of those things. They're going to be formulations of things. They're going to be antibody drug conjugates, PROTACs. We need a way of keeping track of those entities. Of course, we've got our data, the data that's associated with those entities, and we have to place them somewhere, not just in Excel sheets, not, here we've got procedures, our instrumentation, our raw data, the samples and results, data analyses and assumptions. Wouldn't it be great if we had it all in one place to assemble that report? So ideally, it would be, let's take our experimental data, let's take some scientific database platform. As it comes off of our plate readers, let's parse that data, let's get that data appropriately mapped into a database so that we can generate through the tools that are supplied through whatever scientific database management system that you have to assemble those reports easily for you, to share it, to collaborate on it, to invite someone into that platform to see that data and only that data. We can serve any scientific database management system, if it's a good one, should serve as a central repository in your digital lab. What it means is that here it sits and it's your database, but for machine learning purposes, for those data lakes, for other tools that you might use and integrate with it, it should be seamless. It should have a RESTful API in order to talk to it. We've talked about structured data, but what about unstructured data? What about the thoughts that we have about our data? Wouldn't it be great to just write that down? We write that down in our notebooks. How many of you have longevity notebooks here, or some other notebook where you're jotting out those ideas? Let's put them somewhere and associate it with that data that we put into the structured part of the database. That's what you should have. And at the end of the day, we should be able to search for that data. And searching for that data, again, as I said, is searching through those experiments or even drawing out something like thalidomide to find more data around that in our other experiments that we have across. Let's take an experiment. We've got our data points that we've we've got our data points that we've collected from our plate reader. Let's visualize that data so we can make some, conclusions of it. Our chemical analyses, as we go through and compare these entities from one to another, the therapeutics that we are working on, we want to be able to go through and perform our SAR, to perform and see, how it compares and choose what's best in class for each one of these therapeutics that we are trying to bring to the clinic. We can see this data in different ways in that scientific database management system. The idea here is what works for you in your perspective, in your discipline that you are working in. We should be able to customize these views and make them make sense for us. The data was maybe put in by someone else, but we want to go into that system and pull that data, fish that data out for ourselves, and we should take the agency to have that ability to do it so long as that data is accessible. And of course, we talked about inventorying that data, knowing what you have on hand, knowing what's there. I'm talking about those assay informatics. We should be able to, in some structured way, keep track of the experiments that we're running in the laboratory. And as we run them, we want to eliminate those redundancies. We want to see where there's overlap. We want to see where there are gaps in the system so that we know what we have to be doing in order to get the data that we need to get. Maybe we need to apply new knowledge at a later time for data that was collected years ago as we repurpose things. So here, you take agency for the things that you tag with that assay catalog and creating your assay catalog so that you can search and narrow them down by the precise criteria. You can annotate this data. You use them like fingerprints for that. You create your own assay forms, et cetera. That's something that's included in the system. But as I said, maybe this data was collected some years ago, 5 years ago, so we want to apply our new knowledge, and that system should use modern tools today that are available. We all talk about AI, we talk about machine learning these days. We do have, a way, that system should have a way of generating those instant new ideas, such as bioisosteres, detecting those bioisosteres, doing a deep learning search to find similar structures to this, what's out there, what's patented, what's in a vendor library, what's in the public data sets. So the solution, what I'm telling you in terms of a platform such as, what we have out there, is to increase that data life cycle of the research that you're working on. You want to address communication in the system. You can, because you're working on it collaboratively. You can address those finite resources. You can eliminate those inefficiencies that you have to save time, to save money, and to apply the new knowledge that you have learned. We can make it multimodal. We've got chemists, biologists, pharmacologists going into the system to mine the data. We do ensure security in terms of best practices. We do want to eliminate the bad habits that we have a structured organization, preserve that data integrity, and eliminate those data redundancies. So I do want to thank you again. I'm a senior application scientist with CDD Vault. I'm really about helping and supporting, you doing the scientific research. So in fact, I used to be a former user, Vault administrator myself at a few different various companies. I've worked with several different platforms. I do understand the importance of having a structured scientific database because it's essential for the work and making progress and bringing something to clinic, who then, you have a clinical person who will come in to look at that data, to now validate that data, to do their due diligence on that data. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And that ends my talk. Questions?
Thanks, that's good talk. Is there any collaboration between CDD and the NIH on their data management and sharing policy?
Yes, there is. In terms of the one slide, when I was looking at thalidomide, it actually accesses the NIH Cactus database to bring in that structure. We have a few other collaborations as well. So we're a very secure system. But again, this wasn't intended to be a marketing talk. Just think about, in terms of those systems, they should, have policies in place. They should have things in place so that you're working with the secure system.
Hey there. I'm not totally sure how to ask this, so work with me.
Yeah.
We certainly want scientists and people within the organization to be able to access structured databases and communicate about it. And this looks like a great set of tools. I'm curious whether CDD Vault or others in the space are thinking about how to structure data about drugs and therapies such that people from the outside can access it, can understand it better than we typically do. The social conversation in our country, in our world about science, about drugs, is really lacking. What can CDD do to improve that so that people can make data-driven decisions better?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great concept, and I think, working with academic institutions to kind of supply this knowledge, to kind of create, so we do offer, CDD itself offers these public data sets. The public data sets are data that, institutions have, charitably contributed, but maybe that contribution comes in the way of explaining what those entities are, what those therapeutics are, and explaining it in such a way, because you can sort anything in this sort of database and make it accessible, because you have the agency to configure it, to make it all your own, to work for your workflows. And I think if we were to sit down with an institution, an academic, to then say, this is how that biology works, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one way it could be, addressed or solved, and it could be any scientific database platform.